Good afternoon, and welcome to the City Club of Portland, Oregon's premier citizens forum. We're delighted you're with us today. I'm Don Williams, president of City Club. Our speaker today is Ambassador Alan Holmer. His topic, the strategic economic dialogue with China. For the benefit of our radio and television audiences, please turn off your cell phones and Blackberries. Thank you. First, a few announcements. Join us next Friday when our speaker will be U.S. Senator Ron Wyden. His topic is, now is the time to fix health care, and Senator Wyden will outline his health care reform plan. You still have a chance to join the new Leaders Council about 6 hours from now for the film chat series, and tonight's film is Ezra. And Ezra chronicles the story of a former child soldier attempting to find internal peace after the horrors he both witnessed and committed in a decade-long civil war in Sierra Leone. The film is shown at the Hollywood Theater and admission is free. And one of the best parts of this discussion series is the dialogue afterwards where those attending meet at the Laurelwood Pizza Company. If you're interested in the topic of the film, you should also be aware that the selection for the February Citizens Book Read is a book entitled A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier. An event discussion of this book will take place February 25th, 7 o'clock at the City Club Commons. It's free and open to the public. If you haven't filled out one of those little name tags at your table and included the name of your company or organization and then introduce yourself to the people at your table, you're missing out on an important part of the City Club Friday Forum experience. And this interaction is a long-time tradition of City Club, and I think you'll be pleased if you participate in it. We have a few new members today, and please hold your applause while I introduce the three of them, and then you can welcome them to City Club. Alan Bernstein from Blue Frog Services, Aaron Whiteford, who just recently returned to Portland, and David Spracklin. You stand up and be recognized. We wouldn't be able to have these City Club programs without the support and generosity of our great corporate sponsors, and please join me in thanking our sponsors this quarter, the law firm of McEwen Gisvold LLP and Edelman Public Relations. I have only told half of what I saw because no one would have believed me. These were reputed to be the dying words of 14th century trader and explorer Marco Polo, describing his expeditions to China and Asia. He was one of the first Westerners to travel the Silk Road, or ancient trade routes, to Asia. Let's fast forward to 1972, when President Nixon's visit to China was the first step in normalizing relations between the U.S. and the People's Republic of China. Since China now has about 20% of the world's population, its importance to the world's economy has increased dramatically, and now its economy is the second largest in the world after the United States when measured in purchasing power parity basis. And Northwest ties to China are also growing. Portland State University now hosts a new Confucius Institute to promote Chinese language and teaching. An article this week in the Oregonian reported on a Chinese footwear maker which just opened its U.S. headquarters in the Pearl District. But there are problems. The flood of Chinese imports has triggered many lawsuits, and individuals and companies, however, are finding it difficult to gain legal remedies. China has emerged as one of the world's largest producer of farm fish. However, many of the shipments are tainted with unregistered pesticides, and Chinese factories and coal plants shower pollutants on our region. The advertisement for a seminar on opportunities for Northwest companies that was held earlier this morning in this hotel states, being smart about China is now a requirement for CEOs looking to grow their businesses. Well, today we're fortunate to have someone who can help us become smart on China. And I might add, the City Club always likes to have as our speakers Oregonians who have gone on to distinguish themselves, and Alan Holmer is a very good example. Even though he was born in even though he was born in New York City, he moved to Salem when he was 11 days old, and most people would assert that this qualifies him as a native Oregonian. He graduated from South Salem High in 1967, and in fact was a classmate of immediate past President Susan Hammer. Ambassador Holmes then went on to Princeton, where he graduated with honors and earned his law degree at Georgetown. His government experience began when he was chief of staff to Senator Bob Packwood, and his background as a tax attorney was employed at the Reagan White House and in key international trade positions at the Commerce Department. And in 1989, Mr. Holmer became a partner in the law firm, the Washington branch of the law firm Sidley & Austin, and he founded their international trade practice. For 9 years, he was president of the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, and PhRMA represents the country's leading research-based pharmaceutical and biotech companies. 1 year ago, he became the Treasury Department's Special Envoy for China and the Strategic Economic Dialogue. In this role, he leads a team managing the bilateral economic relationship with China. His civic activities include past president of the Metropolitan DC Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and he's a coach. He coaches youth basketball, baseball, softball, and soccer, and he's co-author or editor of 3 books in his spare time. Ambassador Holmer's wife, Joan, is a professor of English literature, I should say, at Georgetown University, and they reside in McLean, Virginia, and have 2 grown children. His brother, Bill, who's sitting at this table, is a City Club member. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador Alan Holmer.
Don, thank you very much. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here today. But I have to admit, I approach this assignment with at least a little bit of trepidation. Last time I spoke before the City Club was 4 or 5 years ago. As Don indicated, I was president and CEO of the trade association representing all the biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies. I was trying to explain to City Club members why they really shouldn't be angry about drug prices and drug company profits. I was pretty satisfied with my performance until I got back to the home of my big brother Bill in Lake Oswego. Seems that Bill's wife, my beloved sister-in-law Marcia, who had been there, was in the ladies' room afterwards. And she overheard one woman asking another, "Well, what'd you think?" And the response was, "I've never heard so much baloney in my entire life." Now, in the interest of full disclosure, the word wasn't baloney, but a little more graphic, but you get the picture. I hope that won't be your reaction once I leave today, but watch what you say. My family may be listening. Among those who may be listening is one individual who I'm especially pleased could be here today, and that's my dad, Freeman Holmer, who had a very distinguished career in Oregon, including serving as state budget director during the 8 years that Mark Hatfield was governor. And maybe most importantly for all of us, last November celebrated his 90th birthday. So Dad, I'm glad you're here. Okay, I'm here to talk about the strategic economic dialogue with China. Why should you care? Possibly the most important economic question in this century is whether or not we get the economic relationship with China right. By that I mean a relationship that is stable, growing, mutually beneficial, and supportive of bilateral relations. Consider two different visions of the U.S.-China relationship. The first is a vision that is dark and problematic. It's a future of a superpower and a rising superpower on a collision course, increasingly suspicious of the other's intentions, scrambling in a zero-sum competition for resources and influence, oblivious to the possibilities of mutual interest. It's a future in which we see each other through caricatures. This relationship is fragile and can be cracked easily by misunderstanding and accident. That's one vision. The second vision is one that is far more hopeful and optimistic. It's one in which our ability to work together matches the degree to which our economies are already so deeply integrated. In this future, we see leadership on each of our countries communicating well, growing in trust, working through misunderstanding and crises, and expanding, where possible, common interests, while recognizing distinct national goals. In this vision, I also see people in each nation that recognize our commonalities, that we mutually benefit from trade, investment, and exchange of people and ideas. It's this second vision that we seek to promote in the strategic economic dialogue. There's hardly any issue, from trade to national security to climate change, or a place from North Korea to Iran to Sudan, where American and Chinese interests do not increasingly overlap. Because China is so fully integrated into the global economy, what happens in China's economy affects the entire international community. And the U.S.-China economic relationship is entering a new phase. First, U.S.-China economic interdependence is deepening. For the U.S., China is our largest growing market in the world for our goods and services. Since China acceded to the World Trade Organization in 2001, U.S. exports to China have grown 5 times faster than our exports to the rest of the world. Investment flows between our two countries are also expanding rapidly. Between 2002 and 2006, U.S. foreign investment in China grew from roughly $10 billion to $22 billion, while in 2007 alone, China's direct and portfolio investment in the U.S. totaled nearly $10 billion. Oregon is clearly a leading example of this interdependence. From 2000 to 2006, Oregon's exports to China grew by 350%, up to a total of $1.4 billion, including computers, electronic products, paper products, machinery, and many other items. China is now Oregon's second largest export market, second only to Canada, and for Idaho and Washington State, China is their #1 export market. So trade and investment between the U.S. and China, between Oregon and China, are clearly booming. And in general, that kind of increase in trade is a good thing and has been a source of stability in our bilateral relations and a source of economic growth for both of our countries. But China has also become the leading symbol of globalization. Trade and investment with China are increasingly becoming a source of tension. Now, when I first became involved in international trade issues in the 1980s, we didn't have significant trade tensions with China. Why? We didn't have much trade. In a sense, the fact that we have trade tensions with China today reflects a maturing of our relationship. We have trade tensions with Canada and Japan and the European Union, and it should come as no surprise that we should also have trade tensions with China with the increase in our economic involvement. But what we need to do is to make sure that we manage these tensions effectively in order to keep our relationship, our economic relationship, on an even keel in our mutual interests. And what I've just described are the reasons why in 2006 President Bush and China's President Hu established the Strategic Economic Dialogue with China. Its purpose was to create a forum and a mechanism to allow both governments to communicate at the highest levels and with one voice on issues of long-term and strategic importance. On the U.S. side, President Bush's special representative for the SED is Secretary of the Treasury Hank Paulson, my immediate boss. On the Chinese side, it's Vice Premier Wu Yi, who has been a terrific advocate on behalf of China. In the Strategic Economic Dialogue, the U.S. has three core objectives. The first is to advance U.S. economic interests by establishing new habits of cooperation between our two countries. The second is to accelerate the next wave of economic transition in China. And the third is to encourage China to act as a responsible economic power. Let me talk about each of those three. First, new habits of cooperation. I'm sure every person in this room has had a relationship, either personal or professional, where you began a conversation with your partner or your counterpart, and you felt that the response was the equivalent of, well, the answer is no. Now, what was your question? And what we're trying to do in the Strategic Economic Dialogue is to achieve the opposite of that, where you approach the relationship with goodwill and with trust, where you're trying to reach, to have a path where you're reaching common solutions. I learned a long time ago that if you're going to be successful in any kind of dialogue, it's essential that you do everything you possibly can to put yourself in the other person's shoes, to try to see the world the way he or she does. This is the way you achieve win-win agreements, the way that you advance mutual interests, the way you achieve agreements that aren't broken at the first opportunity. And as I said, what we call the SED, the Strategic Economic Dialogue, embraces that approach by establishing these new habits of cooperation. Let me just give you a few examples of what we're trying to do there. In May of 2007, we had a meeting, cabinet-level meeting between the U.S. and China in Washington, D.C. It was historic and unprecedented in the sense that on the Chinese side, they had a vice premier that came to Washington, 15 cabinet ministers, heads of 21 different departments and agencies, and many of them bringing deputies or deputies' who were able to meet with their American counterparts and again, be able to understand what their perspectives are. I wish you could have been in the room to see Chairman Ben Bernanke of the Fed explaining to, and I wish you could have seen the rapt attention of the Chinese officials who were there. And believe me, if they want to sleep through a meeting, they're happy to sleep through a meeting. But the rapt attention that they gave to Chairman Bernanke, in which he was explaining to them why it is so much in their interest for them to have a more flexible exchange rate, and why that's so important as far as their interests are concerned. We also made sure we had the Strategic Economic Dialogue held in Washington at a time when the Congress was going to be in session, because we thought it was tremendously important that the Congress hear directly from the Chinese, but equally importantly, that the Chinese hear directly from the Congress. It's so easy to demonize another party or to demonize another country when you're not able to put a face with it. And those sessions truly enhance the level of understanding on both sides. What we're doing is we've established a mechanism where, in terms of advancing this agenda, we're speaking to the right people at the right time, on the right issues, and in the right way. And this is truly has been an innovation, I believe, with respect to U.S.-China relations. So that's our goal number one, advancing U.S. interests by establishing these new habits of cooperation. The second objective is to accelerate China's economic transition. This is the best way to ensure that China continues to grow and to grow in a way that is sustainable, both economically and environmentally. Some historical background, and Don alluded to this a bit. The 1970s was the decade that Nixon went to China, Mao died, China's Cultural Revolution ended, and the weaknesses of China's planned economy became fully apparent. China's new and visionary leaders, led by Deng Xiaoping, charted a new and different course. Rather than the failed, inward-looking approach of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they launched an outward-looking, export-oriented growth strategy. A little over 2 decades later, in 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. It was a significant effort by reform-minded leaders in China to lock in the reforms that had been made up to that point and to commit to new ones. China's growth over the last 3 decades has been nothing short of miraculous. It has transformed itself from a poor, agrarian, mostly agrarian, and almost closed economy into the world's 3rd largest trading nation. In the process, China has had economic growth averaging 10% a year and has lifted hundreds of millions of Chinese citizens out of poverty. In the last 5 years, China and the United States have comprised almost half of global economic growth. Think about that. We have almost 200 countries in this world, and 2 countries, us and China, have accounted for almost half of the worldwide economic growth. Now, as successful as this model has been for China, it is now reaching its limits. The current growth model is unsustainable. We see in China increasingly wasteful investment, rising income inequality, a large and growing current account surplus, and accelerating environmental degradation. We also see weak growth in Chinese employment and in their household income. Household income is growing slower than the rise in their GDP. China is a country of contradictions as it develops rapidly. Just compare the amazingly modern city of Shanghai with Western provinces like Guizhou, whose population of 36 million shares the same per capita GDP as Uganda. China has proven to the world that it can grow fast, but the key issue now is whether or not it can grow differently and sustainably, where the quality of the growth is every bit as important as the quantity of the growth. And bold structural policies are needed to shift China's growth away from heavy industry, high energy use, capital intensiveness, and dependence on exports toward an economy that has greater reliance on domestic demand, production of services, and a greater share of China's income accruing to China's households. This isn't just my view. It's also the view of China's most senior leaders who have told their people that they are committed to addressing these imbalances. Now let me talk about, again, in terms of accelerating China's reforms, I could talk on and on about all sorts of things. Let me highlight 3 things in particular. One is financial sector liberalization and their currency. The second is their regulatory environment and their legal infrastructure. And the third is energy and the environment. First, financial sector liberalization and their currency. The actions that China needs to take and that we've been working with them on include financial market liberalization. This is securities companies, banks, insurance companies, and to develop a plan for them to rebalance their growth. To enable market forces in China to operate most efficiently and to spread prosperity to all the Chinese, China needs more flexible prices, and by that I mean a more flexible market-determined exchange rate. Think of it this way. If you're an individual in China, or if you're an Oregon company wanting to invest in China, in order for investors to know where it is that they should make their investments, it's essential that they receive accurate market signals, which is impossible without a flexible, market-oriented exchange rate. Issue 2, China's regulatory and legal infrastructure. What we see that has happened with China is that China's economy has grown far faster than its regulatory rules and its legal infrastructure. We saw this effect, as Don alluded to, last year with the many product safety issues on toys, food, feed, and other products. At the most recent meeting of the Strategic Economic Dialogue in December in Beijing, we achieved a landmark agreement with the Chinese on food, feed, drugs, and medical devices. That agreement, though, is very much just the start. There is so much more work that needs to be done, and we're eager to work with the Chinese to share our experience and to share our technical expertise. We need to work with them so that they can build in quality at each stage of the manufacturing process and to address other fundamental issues like rule of law and transparency and intellectual property protection. Third major issue where we're trying to advance China's economic reforms more rapidly is with respect to the whole area of energy and the environment. The growth model that has served China so well since the late 1970s has come at a tremendous cost to their environment. Think of the following, the following facts. Of the 20 most polluted cities in the world, 16 are in China. 26% of the surface water in China is totally unusable. 90% of the rivers running through the cities have significant pollution. And the Strategic Economic Dialogue is helping to catalyze China's work on these issues, and we have agreed with the Chinese to work together to establish a 10-year plan and hope that we'll be able to make announcements about that at the next meeting that we'll have of the Strategic Economic Dialogue in June of this year. Okay, I talked about new habits of cooperation. I talked about accelerating the next wave of China's reform. The third major area is encouraging China's responsible global engagement. We have welcomed China into key international financial institutions and have supported giving China a greater voice in them as well. This includes the Financial Action Task Force. It's the Inter-American Development Bank. We're supporting them having greater voting rights in the International Monetary Fund, but we're also underscoring to the Chinese about the importance that along with their increasing participation goes increasing responsibility. I think I'd say, Don, in conclusion, that the issues with China are highly charged in multiple respects. If you doubt me on that, just tune in and listen to Lou Dobbs or watch Lou Dobbs most nights of the week. But as we chart the course of our economic relationship with China, we would be well advised to remember the words of a former American diplomat and chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, a personal hero of mine, a Democratic Senator, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who said this. He said we shouldn't, quote, let the politics of last month or next month affect decisions toward China that go to half-century strategic issues. The economic and geopolitical landscape of the 21st century will be greatly influenced by the way in which the United States and China work together. The SED has allowed both the U.S. and China to begin to write the next chapter of our strategic economic relationship, one based not on mistrust and suspicion, but rather one based on goodwill and understanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And we're now in the question and answer part of our program. Asking questions is a privilege of City Club membership. Given the global scope of Alan's talk, we're going to open it up to non-City Club members as well today. We would ask you to limit your question to 30 seconds, and also end your question with a question mark instead of an exclamation point. Today's first question will be asked by our board host, John Horvick. John is the project director of the Parents and Children Together study at OHSU. He joined the City Club in 2004, right after he moved from the Midwest, and he's co-chair of the New Leaders Council and has served on 2 City Club research committees. John.
Thank you for your presentation, Ambassador. You're speaking at City Club today, one of Oregon's premier civic organizations, and I'm curious, what role do you see civic organizations playing in the strategic economic dialogues? Are they being effective, and are they being heard?
I guess there are so many different ways that civic organizations can have an impact. One is to make sure that you're communicating with your elected policymakers your views on these issues. How important it is that we have a relationship based on understanding and not based on caricatures, that we not have legislation that, let me put it this way, we are never going to be able to protect our way to prosperity. That globalization is here, we need to find a way to be able to embrace it, and there are any numbers of ways in which civic organizations can be helping in enhancing America's competitiveness. I'm confident the City Club is engaging in many of those, but also at the same time making sure that as part of that we take advantage of the tremendous opportunity that engagement with countries like China has for us. So I think having forums like this one and others where you're able to expand understanding. I know that that China's Ambassador Zhou was out in Portland earlier. I think that was just an excellent opportunity to be able to exchange views. I give him real credit for how extensively he does that around the country. Next question.
Paul Milius, club member, and I'm also a board member of the Northwest China Council, and since 1980 we've been promoting interest in China and education about what goes on there. I've personally done business in China for nearly 30 years. You've spoken about U.S. priorities for the strategic economic dialogue. What do the Chinese need to get out or want to get out of this dialogue?
Well, that's a terrific question. More than anything else, I think the Chinese want to be treated with dignity and respect as a global economic power, and I think that's clearly happening. They want to develop these further habits of cooperation. They want to make sure that they have continued access to the U.S. market. They want to be able to continue to invest in the U.S. market and have clarification with respect to our national regulations. And there are a whole bunch of specific things that of other issues they've raised. They want they have a very significant interest with respect to our export control laws, where there's been some progress made, not as much as they want, but some progress made. They clearly wanted cooperation with us on the issues of product safety, which occurred, and all the issues surrounding energy efficiency, energy security, and environmental sustainability. I can keep going, but membership in the Inter-American Development Bank, membership in the Financial Action Task Force, helping them with respect to development of their rural banks within China. I'll leave it at that. Good question.
Mac Pritchard, City Club member. You talked about the importance of China to the Oregon economy, and you also talked about pollution in China. What opportunities do you see for Oregon companies, particularly those involved in environmental sustainability?
Well, I think there's just tremendous opportunity. I mean, when you go and travel to China and you see the environmental challenges that they have, and you have an opportunity to visit with companies here in Oregon or Washington or elsewhere around the United States and see the extent to which we have technology that can help them with respect to their challenges, there's tremendous opportunity. I do talk to some companies that say, well, yes, we want to engage further in China, but we're afraid they're going to steal our technology. And it's one of the items that's front and center in our engagement with China, is to make sure that not only do they have the right laws on the books for intellectual property, but they also enforce those, and not just in Beijing, but also in the provinces around the country. So I think partly because of Oregon's traditional export orientation and the location here, there's just a tremendous opportunity, as you see by the tremendous increase that there's been in U.S. exports and the visits I have from companies like Intel and Nike and others that are fully engaged.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, Barb Wolf, City Club member. I certainly believe we're doing the right thing, helping them, cooperating with them, but I do have a question environmentally. We had a silly little discussion at home one day saying, we're exporting our steel to China and what we're importing is their styrofoam. I happened to buy some furniture from the Smithsonian, and it all came packaged in this horribly molded styrofoam. Is there any thought given to their exports being packaged in some different way when you speak of economics?
I don't know that has been on the agenda that has been pursued yet with the Chinese. This is a little bit outside of my area of expertise in terms of what the American rules are. If you have time, I'd like to talk with you when we're done. I'd like to know what the rules are here as they relate to American companies. But the agenda that we have with the Chinese in terms of our 10-year plan is a very broad one. And there may be opportunities for us to be able to pursue this further. I'll be right down here when we're done. If we could have a chance to talk further, I'd welcome that opportunity.
I'd love to, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Zarin, City Club member. You mentioned Lou Dobbs. I wasn't watching Lou Dobbs, but I was watching CNN the other night. They had a very interesting dialogue between Fareed Zakaria and David Gergen about the challenges facing the next president. And of course, they did talk about China. And one of the things that Fareed Zakaria said is that between China and India, in the next few years, they're going to build enough power plants to emit 5 times more pollution into the atmosphere than the Kyoto Accords are designed to not emit. And Fareed Zakaria said that that's not going to change unless the United States somehow invests in the environmental solutions, to which David Gergen said ain't going to happen. So I guess I'd be curious of your comment about the extent to which the United States must somehow participate in the growing economy of China going a different direction in terms of its environmental policies, and whether or not we're going to have the political will to do that if that's required.
Let me respond as there are multiple aspects of what you just raised, and there are I guess I'd go at it this way. The people that work this issue specifically within the Bush administration tell me that, that obviously during the course of the past 7 or 8 years, there's much has been learned about the science that underlies climate change. Domestically, the U.S. is taking some important steps in terms of gasoline consumption and CAFE standards and other things. There are important steps that the U.S. has taken with respect to greenhouse gas emissions, but in terms of the investment that you're talking about, the U.S. is a leader in research and development of alternative fuels, and there is a very substantial item that's included in the budget for fiscal year 2009 that the Congress will be addressing shortly. And U.S. corporations and universities are on the cutting edge of that new clean technology. To address climate change, we have to do it, as you alluded to, in a way where China is at the table, India is at the table, Brazil's at the table, the United States is at the table, and that's the conversation that is occurring right now. A critical piece of that is what we're attempting to pursue with the Chinese on this 10-year plan. I mean, it's a critically important question, and for any of you who've had a chance to pay attention to Secretary Paulson, my boss, the Secretary of the Treasury, the former chairman of the Nature Conservancy, this is an issue on which he is passionately committed, and one that we're going to continue to have as a priority in our dialogue. Next.
Lee Stevenson Kuhn, City Club member. You've just commented on really what was the direction of my question, but I'm going to ask you to kind of step ahead of what you just said a little bit, or think outside the box. And my question was started with the premise that China's on a program right now to build, in 10 years, build 600 coal-burning plants. And unfortunately, the technology that's available in the world, including the United States and other developed countries, is very polluting. What is the
again?
Very polluting? Mm-hmm. What is the best strategy to avoid an environmental tsunami from this 600 plant program in China? Just what is your best strategy?
Well, it's two things in particular. One is for them, and it's what I talked about before, in terms of them rebalancing their economy, instead of them making decisions that are continuing to focus on heavy manufacturing and overinvestment in those areas, be it steel production or cement production or other areas, for them to be rebalancing their economy away from the heavy industry that's very energy intensive and high polluting toward more a domestic consumption driven economy. That is going to make a huge amount of difference. The second is to the extent that we can be working with them together on clean coal technologies and be able to bring that forward more rapidly than would have been the case otherwise. I mean, you're putting your finger on a hugely important challenge that we need to be able to work with them on. I guess I don't think there is any magic bullet on this that anybody can cite. But I think those two items in particular are the ones that are going to have the greatest impact. Helping them rebalance their economy and realize why that's so important for them, and encouraging that, and also being able to work with them on being able to have the best technology that's available in order to be able to reduce the pollution that you rightly are so concerned about.
Thank you very much.
My name is Gail Meyer, City Club member. I'd like to stay on the issue of the environment again. I'd like to have understanding of what kind of an environmental consciousness the Chinese have. When you talk about negotiating with them on this issue, are they simply trying to appease the demands of a trade partner, or do they themselves have a concern about the condition of their own environment and a sense of responsibility to their citizens, let alone to the rest of us on the globe?
Mm-hmm. How many of you have been to China at some point? How many in the last 15 years? How many of you have been stunned by the air pollution? If you're a Chinese leader, you have to recognize the adverse impact that the pollution is having on your people. And the need for them to be able to address these issues. And I am encouraged by the kind of reaction that Secretary Paulson has had from the most senior leaders in China about being able to address these issues on the 10-year plan. I do believe that they care about their people, about the environment in which they live, the environment in which they live, and are serious about addressing that. Now, having said that, I think they're also serious about lifting their people out of poverty. And so you do have a tension there. But we do see it in a number of areas where they are attempting to shift from not just an economy that grows rapidly, but also one that can grow differently. As a government, we are doing everything they can. We're doing everything we can to be able to push them in that direction. Thank you for the question.
Hi, my name is Ann Collins. I'm a City Club member, and my question concerns human rights in China. Thinking back to Tiananmen Square, what are we doing as a country to prevent that from ever happening again?
There are continuing conversations that are within the jurisdiction of the U.S. State Department that are occurring with China, and that underscore the importance that we place with respect to human rights issues, either involving the Dalai Lama or Tibet or other subjects. It's an item that continues very much to be on the U.S. agenda. It is not a specific item that we frequently raise in the conversations that we have on the economic dialogue, although I will tell you that there are some specific items that I can talk with you offline that Secretary Paulson has had conversations with people about there. Yes?
Hello, I'm Chuck Mitchell, City Club member, and it's kind of a follow-up question to the last one. The Chinese government has its fingers in Sudan and in Burma, getting gas and oil leases. When you travel down the streets of Yangon, you see a massive amount of cheap consumer goods in those countries, or Laos. Do you believe that the U.S. government should use economic tools to discourage China from supporting repressive regimes?
I'm sorry.
Do you believe the U.S. should use economic tools to discourage China from supporting these repressive regimes? Seems kind of up your alley.
I think one of the benefits that we have had of the strategic economic dialogue is that it has presented an opportunity for us to be able to deal more constructively with China, for example, on the areas with North Korea. And I know that's been a positive development. It has provided an environment where our U.S. State Department has been able to have effective conversations with them regarding the Sudan. A dear friend of mine is the President's new special envoy for the Sudan bill. It's Rich Williamson. And I'm sure there are other things that he'd like to have a chance to do further. In terms of using, let's go back to the specific question. Should the U.S. use our economic leverage to achieve the objectives that we would like China to meet in whatever that foreign country might be? Now, the economic leverage we have is, the principal economic leverage we have is the U.S. market. And I guess the follow-on question, I'm thinking out loud as we go here, is that, well, if we say do X and they don't do it, there could be proposals to impose a 10% tariff on their exports to the U.S. or a 20% tariff or a 30% tariff. I'm not sure that those are, when we look at the final analysis, if that is going to be in our interests, or if it is going to be effective in achieving the objectives that we might have with the Chinese. So again, I'm thinking out loud on all of that. I think there'd be lots of questions as to what would be the most effective way of pursuing whatever the U.S. government objectives are in that country. I'm not sure that just saying, well, we're going to shut down your access to the U.S. market is either going to be effective or in our interests. Next question.
There's a basic concept in economics of using your resources for either guns or butter. And I'm wondering how the Chinese approach this issue in terms of how they use their resources and how they divide them between what we've been mostly talking about, which is the private sector.
Interesting question. In terms of how specifically they make their decisions, it is a number of their ministries, including in particular their national NDRC, the National Development and Reform Commission, that has recommendations that bubble up and ultimately are made by their state council, which is the equivalent of our cabinet. How specifically they go about deciding guns versus butter, I can't tell you. It is a more opaque, obviously, system than what it is that we have in our country. Again, getting back to what I was describing before, an objective that the U.S. has is, as I indicated, to get them to be able to expand their level of domestic consumption. It is in their interest to reduce their very high savings rate, which is driven in part by the fact that they don't have much of a social safety net and people feel that they have to save for retirement, have to save for health care, have to save for education. And the more they can be able to get those resources into the hands of individual Chinese households, I think the better off ultimately they're going to be. But that's about all I can say on that. Thank you.
Hi, Joanne Khan, City Club member. I understand there are some leadership changes, new people coming on in the Chinese government in this spring, and I wondered what you think about upcoming changes in their leadership.
What's being described there is China, once every 5 years, they have a national party congress. That occurred last October, where they elected new leadership of their party. Next month, starting on March 5th, they're going to have a National People's Congress where they will determine, they've decided who are going to be the people in the party leadership, who will be the new people on the government side. They'll have at least 3, maybe 4 new vice premiers and a whole new set of leaders on the economic side. There are all sorts of press reports, all sorts of rumors as to exactly who those individuals are going to be. We'll know a month from now. In terms of the people that have come forward on the party side, particularly the individuals who are likely to be or who appear to be in line ultimately 5 years from now to be the new president and premier of China, are individuals who have broad experience both in economics and law and in the provinces. It's kind of like the equivalent of somebody who had been both mayor of New York City and governor of Florida, who have now been elevated into leadership positions. So we'll see how that all plays out. And beyond that, it's hard to say as to who the individuals are going to be. Thank you.
It's Bill Wyatt, City Club member. The current account balance, which is obviously developing at a rapid pace in China with dollars, it is reminiscent of a time in the 80s when we had a similar circumstance with the Japanese, and they resolved that problem by buying a lot of assets in this country, and you may remember the hubbub when I think it was Mitsubishi bought the Rockefeller Center, and this region has been actually a big recipient of that reverse investment. And I'm curious, if you see increasing trends in that direction from Chinese companies. We've already seen some, and whether or not that is a part of your dialogue.
Bill, good. Thank you. It's investment is clearly an important part of the dialogue, not just maintaining an open environment for trade, but also maintaining an open environment for investment, both U.S. companies investing in China and being able to do that in a way where they're able to protect their interests, but also Chinese investment in the United States. We welcome that investment. It stimulates growth, jobs, productivity, and our competitiveness. We also have a mechanism that's run by the Treasury Department, where we do review based on national security interests, whether or not those are being compromised by that investment. But I was always struck, it's not as if the Japanese were going to be able to buy the Rockefeller Center and dismantle it and put it on a carrier and take it back to Japan. It's not like, well, I could go on and on about that. Our belief is we do benefit from that investment, that they benefit from our investment, and we want to be able to keep those investment flows moving. Yes.
Muriel Lezak, club member. Are other Western countries involved in this economic dialogue? And if so, how, and how do we relate to them?
Thank you for the question. You know, sometimes imitation is the greatest form of flattery, and we established our strategic economic dialogue in 2006. We have been there is now a similar economic dialogue between the Europeans and the Chinese, specifically the UK and the Chinese, the Japanese and the Chinese. We find that those are all productive. We do have an opportunity to be able to talk with other government officials from each of those entities to be able to compare notes and see how it is that we can have common interests that we'd be pursuing. Thank you. Yes. Don tells me we have time for, I'm sorry for you, but this is our last question.
Corey Allen, City Club member. There's a lot of concern about the U.S. Consumer slowing down spending, and we've been spending it a lot on Chinese products. And this is happening about the time that we will have some leadership change. How do you see these two things, if they occur at the same time, how will that affect our relationship with China and the influence that we've been gaining with them?
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? I don't quite follow the question.
We're concerned about an economic slowdown, primarily consumer spending.
Right.
At the same time, we are going through election cycles, so there will be a new administration. Mm-hmm. So how are these two events, how will they affect the ongoing relationship with China and what we've been doing, the clout that we have built so far with them?
The Chinese do pay close attention to the U.S. economy, and they're continuing to do that. The view that of Secretary Paulson at the Treasury Department is that while we have had issues with respect to the housing correction, and it will take time for those situations to play out, that our economy is fundamentally strong. My view is that as you go through this year into next year, you'll have a new administration. But I believe that whichever the administration is going to want to continue to have a strong, vibrant relationship with China. I certainly hope so. And even though we're going through some economic issues currently, I think there's going to continue to be a tremendous opportunity for us to continue to grow and develop our relationship with China at multiple levels. Thank you all very much. It's great to be back in Portland.
Before I thank our speaker, I want to thank the City Club members for their questions. A key part of our mission statement is inform its members and the community in public matters, and I think your questions did a great job in doing that, so thank you very much. And Alan, I know you're going to be out here periodically for class reunions at South Salem High, and we hope that you come back to City Club every time you do that. We're adjourned.